Who will remember the hands so white and fine that touched the finest linen and poured the finest wine? Who will remember the gentle words they spoke, to name the lives of two good men, a nuisance or a joke? And all who knew these two good arms know I never need to rob or kill. I can live by my own two hands and live well. And all my life I have struggled to rid the earth of all such crimes. Who will remember Judge Webster Thayer, one hand on the gallows, the other resting on a chair? Who will remember the hateful words he said, speaking to the gallows in the language of the dead? And all who knew these two good arms will know I never need to rob or kill. I can live by my own two hands and live well. And all my life I have struggled to rid the earth of all such crimes. And who will remember the hand upon the switch that took the lives of two good men in the service of the rich? And who will remember the one who gave the nod, or the chaplain standing near at hand to invoke the name of God? And we will remember this good shoemaker, and we will remember this poor fish peddler. We will remember the strong arms and hands that never once found justice in the hands that rule this land. And all who knew these two good men know that they never had to rob or kill. Each had lived by their own two hands and lived well. And all their lives they struggled to rid the earth of all such crimes. And all our lives we will struggle to rid the earth of all such crimes. Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dean Stevens, and I am the Administrator, Music Director, Fake Minister of Community Church of Boston. And we've been in summer mode, but we always perk back up for this event, especially after the passing of Bob Datilio, who was not a member here, but a very important cog in the wheel, which is connects us with Sacco and Vanzetti. Bob would not be a member of anything, says Joe Torra, who is with us and is one of our presenters tonight. And the wheels go all the way back to 1920. You look in our archives, that's the year we were founded, and the very first entry is a Sacco and Vanzetti supper that's held at a function hall in one of the big hotels right here in Copley Square, and it's a benefit for the Sacco and Vanzetti Defense Committee. And it goes from there, and we were founded, we became a speaker series that had a different presenter pretty much every Sunday, and always had this connection with Sacco and Vanzetti. In 1927, Well, let me go back up a little bit. Mrs. Winslow was one of the founding mothers of this church. Out of the 7 that are on our founding charter, 3 of them were women, and one of them was Mrs. Winslow, Mrs. Gertrude Winslow, whose granddaughter happens to be with us tonight, Judy Walcott. Yeah, and that's sort of the strands of connection that we talk about that weave us all together. Mrs. Winslow befriended Vanzetti and went to the Charlestown jail frequently to tutor him in English. And when 1927 came and word of and the execution happened, she was in Italy with Vanzetti's family. And now, fast forward to this plaque that's on the wall that remembers Sacco and Vanzetti. It's by the famous and infamous sculptor Gutzon Borglum, and we have one of the castings of that plaque here. And Bob Datilio was important in the process of getting it, so it's here. We also have this goal, this long-term goal. We're not working a lot on it right now, but of having a public monument that includes a casting of that same quote from Vanzetti and that same piece of art. I really am very happy to receive not only our 3 presenters here, but several other people I want to mention. One is Laura Hausman, who was a good friend of Bob, and she was a student of Carol Ann Datilio. Carol Ann, yes? Carol Ann Pastori was her name, Datilio. Dance instructor at Boston Conservatory, and Laura was one of her students way back then, and Laura received a whole mountain of books about dance that we got out of Bob's house after he passed. I also want to mention Wendy. Yes, Lament, who is curator and education director. I'm probably screwing up her official title, but of the exhibit, the permanent Sacco and Vanzetti exhibit that is at the John Adams Courthouse that houses the Supreme Judicial Court and also the Appeals Court. It's a beautiful building. Wendy gives tours of the building and recently just did a symposium on the Sacco and Vanzetti exhibition there. That's a permanent exhibition. I can't help but think about both the irony of an exhibition about one of the most horrific miscarriages of justice that's housed in the building that holds the supreme judicial bodies in the Commonwealth. It's sort of both irony, and it's also just sort of speaks to humility. You know, hey, we are the most important body in this land, but we're not so laden with hubris that we can't say that, boy, did we ever screw up that one, and we want to have it there as a cautionary tale. It's not the first, and it won't be the last serious miscarriage of justice. And so that's what I want to say. And I also mentioned Judy Walcott, who's a granddaughter of Mrs. Winslow. Also, just here, but they had to leave, was Camille Arbogast. She is the director of the Nichols House Museum on Beacon Hill. And we found out just by coincidence that one of the Nichols daughters, it was a prominent Beacon Hill, let's call them Brahmin family, that became some of these rebels who were sticking up for things like the labor union protesters in Lawrence and Lowell, or something like the Sacco and Vanzetti case, or immigrants on walking the streets of Boston. It's a remarkable thing. But her name was Margaret Nichols, and she married Arthur Shercliffe, who became one of the most important city planners and landscape designers of the city of Boston, worked with Frederick Law Olmsted. And the Shercliffes built a house in Ipswich that just by coincidence, one of my best friends is the housekeeper or gardener of this Shercliffe house. And we made this connection, and Jill says to me, hi Jill, I think she's joining us on Zoom. Margaret Shercliffe was really interested in the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and you should check it out. And so we went to the Nichols house, Jerry and I, and we got a tour, and come to find out, in our archives, which are on the 5th floor, magnificent record of 104 years of community churches history, we found out that Mrs. Shercliffe was very involved and active at Community Church of Boston. In 1940, 20 years later, she was the treasurer of the church. And at that time, it was not a small undertaking being treasurer of here. At that time, the church met in Symphony Hall and received on a Sunday morning the likes of anywhere from 800 to 2,000 people who would come to hear the likes of W.E.B. Du Bois or Scott Nearing or Robert Frost, or the list goes on and on. It's really remarkable history that we have here, and always intertwined with Sacco and Vanzetti. And the most recent iteration in the last, what is it now, 74, it's 50 years, we've given an annual Sacco and Vanzetti Award for Social Justice, or Sacco and Vanzetti Memorial Award. The most recent recipient last year was the Peace Abbey, and its directors, Megan Lewis Randa, and its chaplains, Dan Dick and Dot Walsh. And before that was the Holy Land Foundation 5. We have quite a list of people over the years to whom we've given the award to. Start with William Kunstler, go on to Cesar Chavez, Rosa Parks, go on to Mumia Abu Jamal, Leonard Peltier. It's really a remarkable list, and we're just very proud of that part of what we do at Community Church. One of our longest standing, just brilliantly talented members is named David Rothauser, and he's going to be our first presenter tonight. David, in addition to being a filmmaker who has a historical film about the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which you, by the way, can find on our YouTube channel, also did a film about Hiroshima, and has written a historical novel, a beautiful novel, based on Sacco and Vanzetti. And he's also become recently very interested in this same Margaret Shercliffe that I just told you about. This is a copy of her book. It's called Lively Days. This Margaret Shercliffe, in addition to sort of matron of a family, was also a very skilled woodworker and teacher to women of woodworking and carpentry. Their house is just remarkable. It's in Ipswich. If you're really interested, I'd probably get you a tour. It's hand-hewn. The entire house is hand-hewn doors and latches and cabinets and counters. It's really a beautiful thing to see. David, let's say hello to David Rothauser. We're going to hear from both, I think, his novel as well as some selections from Mrs. Shercliffe's memoir.
Thank you, Dean. people hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Community Church, for inviting me to speak this evening. I've been here a lot. I come frequently. I love to talk here, and I've been doing research since 1972 on the Sacco Vanzetti case, and I did my graduate thesis in filmmaking at BU on the Sacco Vanzetti case, and eventually produced my own film about it. But I'd like to talk a little bit tonight about Margaret Shercliffe that Dean was talking about earlier. Margaret Shercliffe was one of a group of Boston Brahmin women who were organized by Elizabeth Glendower Evans. Now, Elizabeth Glendower Evans came to the Sacco Vanzetti case in 1921, and she came to it as an elderly woman. She was 66 years old, and she attended every day of the trial in Dedham, Massachusetts, about the Sacco Vanzetti case. She wrote about it. She produced newsletters about it. She was published about it. And anyway, she organized a group of women from Beacon Hill to go to the prison where Sacco and Vanzetti were and teach them English. Their English was not the best in the world at that time. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Their trials, for example, were conducted in English by lawyers who spoke lawyer legalese, like they frequently do. However, these lawyers spoke with Boston accents. Now, try to imagine how the following question might have sounded to Italian immigrants who struggled to comprehend the simplest words of Boston English. Okay, so here's the prosecuting attorney cross-examining Nicola Sacco. Now, this quote is not taken from the trial. I made this one up, but it could have been. It could have been. Who knows? Anyway, here's the prosecuting attorney. Mr. Sacco, are you now, or have you ever been a member of the Communist, Socialist, or Anarchist Party? And Sacco, if you can imagine, was sitting there wondering what the hell this man was talking about. But as I would have been at that time, and even, well, now I've acclimated myself to the Boston accent a little better. I'm not from here originally. I'm from New Jersey originally, and a die-hard Yankee fan. But don't tell anyone. Anyway, the first selection I'm reading to you is from Nicola Sacco, who wrote to Margaret Shercliffe on June 6, 1925. By that time, his English had improved considerably. Anyway, this is a letter to Mrs. Shercliffe. Dear Mrs. Shercliffe, June 4, our dear friend, Mrs. Evans, was out here to see me, and she brought me a little small, elegant sweater, which you send it for my little Inez. And I thank you so ever much for it, and for the kind and elegant thought you had for my little beauty Inez. I was so glad to get it, because I know that it will prepare a great surprise to my little Inez. She is so dear to me that I cannot express myself how much I love her. Every time that she comes, she always hug me, she kiss me, and keep on asking me if I have some little thing for her. And because she knows that I always prepare for her some little thing which my friends bring to me. Sacco was not allowed to use his hands to make anything in the Dedham jail while he was not, had not been sentenced. In those days, a prisoner, a convict, could not work with their hands, were not permitted to work with their hands until after they were sentenced. And that didn't happen to Sacco and Vanzetti until 1927. So here he was from 1921 to 1925, could not use his hands. And so his friends would bring him little things to give to his daughter, Inez. But it is for a few times now that Inez didn't feel cheerfully that she used to when she was out here to see me with her dear mother. She felt so bad, and her mother had to bring her home right away. And the mother, she was also looked so depressed that I don't remember to have seen her so badly. Poor little dear mother. If they do not finish this iniquitous case sooner, I am afraid they will kill her. It is too much suffering altogether, inside and outside the prison. Nicola Sacco. Before Sacco and Vanzetti were the Sacco and Vanzetti that we memorialize, they were Nicola and Bartolomeo, and later on Nick and Bart, two unknown Italian immigrants in love with life and the people around them. My next selection is chapter 3 from my novel, Sacco's Crucible. I arrived in this country 4 years ago, 1908. I am a kid then. I don't know nothing American, but I'm crazy about this place. Everybody is crazy for America. She's a beautiful woman with a big smile. Grazie, Lady Liberty. My older brother, Sabino, he shepherds me from Italy. 11 days on the sea, we disembark in Boston. Then, first night, we're in Milford, a small town where Sabino's friend lets us sleep in his attic. Soon, Sabino finds work in a foundry. My heart is dancing. Every day, I go to the foundry gate and wait like a puppy dog for Sabino. We go everywhere together, me and Sabino. He buys me funny American food. It's too sweet, like candy. We die laughing every day. We wander the roads and the hills. We even go to the Catholic Church. I find myself sitting next to a small girl. She's pretty, very pretty. Oh my God, I am soon in heaven. I forget the Mass. At the end, she's still pretty. Sabino takes me home. I don't like Sabino pays for my food and clothes. I am young and strong. He finds work for me as a water boy for a construction gang. A week later, we go to the church again. The girl is still there. She's still pretty. Maybe she speaks Italian. I whisper to her, Mi chiamo Ferdinando. I will not continue in Italian because my Italian is not the best in the world. But anyway, he spoke to her in Italian, and what he said is, my name is Ferdinando, but I changed it to Nicola when my brother Ferdinando died. I work as a water boy on a construction gang. Her eyes flash brightly. Mio padre piacere. Her father will like me. Oh Dio, life is good, I mumble. My name is Rosina, she whispers. The black red rose is my favorite flower, I say with beating heart. Shh! Beckons a scowling nun. Before 1 year, one day, my brother Sabino grabs my arm at the foundry gate. Tonight we pack our bags, we're going back to Italy. Huh? I reply. This is no place for us, Nando. We work twice as hard as in Italy and make only half a week's bread. What for? To make the boss rich, more rich? I can't go back. I'm in love, I protest. You come home with me, you understand? We do business in Italy and travel. You stay in this place, they're going to swallow you up someday. Don't worry about the girl. If she loves you, she'll come to Italy, I guarantee. She can't. She loves her father. I reason. Now, Sabino has no argument. He returns to Italy. Time passes. Rosina is 17. Me, 21. A good time to get married. I remember the very day I asked her father if he would let Rosie come with me to the city town to buy something. He says, yes. And away we go to the city town. And we bought a brown hat, a white underdress, a blue suit that matched my blue suit, and one pair of brown shoe, one pair of brown sock. And after she was all dressed up, I wish everybody could see Rosina, how nice she looked. And my final selection is about Vanzetti, and let's see, he has the title of the chapter is called The Pope of Villa Falletto. Before coming to America, both Sacco and Vanzetti were deeply and seriously members of the Catholic faith. After a few years in America, they became atheists. My reading next is about Vanzetti's Catholic life in Italy. In Italia, every Saturday morning at 11 sharp, I went religiously to confess my sins to the priest I could not see, even when there were no sins to confess. So I made them up. Then one day it occurs to me that by making up sins, I am lying to God. A sin in itself. This posed a terrific dilemma. How else do I cleanse my soul pursuant to entering heaven if I am guilty of committing sin in the process? With this complication clouding my brain, I enter the confessional halfway. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Should I continue into this black inquisition or sprout wings and fly to my freedom from my own hypocrisy? In I go, but I leave the door a little ajar in case I want to make a quick escape. There's nothing to fear, my son. You are safe in the house of God. It's the priest. How does he know I'm not a girl? Does he truly have divine powers to see through the woven mesh of secrecy, protecting he and I from personal recognition? You may close the confessional door, my son. I do. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Venial or mortal, my son. Venial, Father. Name them, and how frequently you committed them, my son. I had impure thoughts, my Father, every day, 7 days a week. A loud gagging sound interrupts my thought. Suddenly the priest bolts from the confessional, I opened the door to peek out. Where did he go? An elderly couple are kneeling at the altar. The woman's face is purplish. A young priest administering communion appears flustered. She's choking on the Eucharist, he says. The confessional priest grabs the flask of sacramental wine, and he pours it down her throat, spilling the good wine down her chin and onto her dress. Wiping her face with his cassock, he spies my bewildered face. He points authoritatively to the confessional. I scurry back in. The woman's dress is stained forever with the blood of Christ. Say 10 Hail Marys and 15 rosaries, bemoans the priest to my humble soul. Struck by this thunderbolt, I ponder the situation for several minutes. The priest has the patience of a saint. Thank you, Father, I mutter into the gauze screen. The priest mumbled something back which I fail to understand. I open the door to the confessional. With mouths wide open and eyes bulging, the elderly couple are still kneeling at the altar. They glare at me as though I am Lucifer incarnate. Do they know something about me that I should have confessed? A mortal sin? The romp with my darling Isabella? The elderly communion woman thrusts her sacrificial crucifix at me. A tiny bead of bloody red wine drips onto her already besoused dress. I am shaken. Sitting quietly in this little Italian church, I began to look inside myself, to reflect on what all this means. Make up sins, lie to God, feel guilty? I have never felt guilt, even when I had real sins to confess. I had been trained to accept that guilt plus fear would get me into heaven. A group of nuns assemble in the balcony, and they begin to practice a Gregorian chant. Miserere e parce, spare your mercy. Their sweet music rings into my soul. Thank you.
It's
Can I make an announcement?
sure an announcement from David.
Before I forget. Sunday, there is a Palestine encampment on the Boston Common all day long. Actually, it starts tomorrow, and then it continues on Sunday. And Sunday, I was invited to read from my Gaza poetry that I've written, and I write every day. But anyway, please come if you have the time to do it.
What time are you going to read?
I'll be reading at 12:30 p.m.
Cambridge Common, Gaza encampment. David will be reading Gaza poems. I hope I can be there. That sounds amazing for all those reasons. The book is called Diary of Sacco and Vanzetti. Am I right, David? The book.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And it's a beautiful book. I've read several excerpts from it, and it should be published. We should get it published, David.
I'm doing what I can.
Yeah, well, you need any help,
I may have to
let us know.
I don't know.
Yeah. David, you're amazing, and thank you for the readings from Margaret Shirkliff as well. We have Michele Fazio in the house. that would be the virtual house. Um, and it's just a great thing to be able to receive Michele here for this event. Michele was good friends with Bob Datilio and has been a really wonderful resource for us to figure out what to do with all of Bob's stuff that we inherited and carted over here, and that she has been just amazed with the content and the quality and the depth of this resource that we have. And this is a moment to mention a certain Jerry Kaplan, who by complete serendipity retired right around when his friend Bob Datilio passed away. And Jerry and I carried 15 carloads worth of books and materials over, maybe even more than that, from Medford to here. And Jerry has spent 2.5 years as a volunteer just curating, organizing, cataloging, preserving all of this treasure of resource that is here that will soon go to the Boston Public Library. We're hoping to do something ceremonial for that transition, but the two archivists from the special collections were not available tonight. So we will have to do that maybe on the occasion of our giving the Sacco and Vanzetti Award, which generally happens towards the end of the year. We will also bring Jay, Michele, and Eve, I don't remember her last name, here and talk about that transfer of resources. That was where Bob wanted them, and that is where they belong because they can better care for them. Not to say that Jerry has done a slouchful job of doing that himself, but at the BPL, they can be archived and they can be available to scholars and academics of all sorts. So I come back to Michele Fazio, who's a professor in North Carolina, University of North Carolina, Pembroke, and an author. She has presented with us a number of times. And Michele, I'm just so grateful that you are with us and willing to participate and share. Michele Fazio.
Thank you, Dean. I hope you can hear me. I want to say hello to
Yes.
Dean, to Jerry, and to David. I miss you guys, and I'm hoping to be back in Boston in December. I also want to give a shout out to my friend Jessica, who's on YouTube. She's helped me with some work on Sacco and Vanzetti. So I'm honored to be here tonight with all of you to remember the legacy of Sacco and Vanzetti, and to introduce you to Boston-based writer Joseph Torra. As someone who teaches and writes about contemporary literature, I think it's incredibly important to highlight the work of local authors like Torra, who imaginatively portray the lives of everyday working people and their struggles to make it in America. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Yeah. So hopefully you can see that. Torra's body of work includes over 17 books of poetry and fiction, including the My Ground trilogy, wherein the novel Gas Station.
It's just a black screen right
Oh.
now, Michele.
Hold on.
There we go.
Oh, wait. Let me go back. You see it here?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. So Gas Station, published in 1996, Torra meticulously describes what it's like changing snow tires for 9 hours straight, where the repetitive motion of hand-turning lug wrenches and mounting rims wears on the body and the mind. Torra's fiction often depicts working-class Italian-American characters who live in the greater Boston area. In the novel, They Say, published in 2007, we meet a meat cutter who admits that gambling offered him a chance to survive. Quote, I did what I had to do over the years. I started out at one of the little butcher shops in Revere. But hey, you try to support a family on that money. You try to make an honest buck in this world. It doesn't go a long way. There's an edginess to Torra's storytelling. He's not afraid to address the brutality of working lives and tell readers like it is. That hard work doesn't always pay off. That self-care is a luxury the working class cannot afford. That families and communities fragment under the pressures of achieving the so-called American dream. Torra addresses this disillusionment in his memoir, Who Do You Think You Are? Reflections of a Writer's Life, published in 2021, where he closes the gap between writing fiction and recalling his own experiences growing up as a second generation working class Italian American. He writes, quote, "Inside me, I sensed something. I burned. I longed. I thought maybe there could be another way. I didn't have to be a nowhere man. I could think for myself." It's not a stretch, then, to make the claim that Torra's writing embodies the same values that Sacco and Vanzetti upheld in the 1920s, the belief in the dignity and humanity of workers. It's one of the reasons why I admire his work and why I recommended to Dean that we invite Joseph Torra to this evening's event. I got to know Joe through Bob Dilatilio, who insisted that I meet his friend Joseph, the writer. Bob thought we shared common interests, and he was right. Joe teaches literature and creative writing at Umass Boston, the place where we both earned our master's degrees. Unfortunately, the three of us never got to meet in person together. It was only after Bob's passing, when we worked with members of the Sacco and Vanzetti Commemoration Society and the Community Church of Boston to plan Bob's memorial service, that Joe and I first spoke. And I'm happy to say we became immediate friends, talking about art, music, and literature, as well as the challenges of teaching working class students like ourselves during the pandemic. We served as guest lecturers in each other's classes, encouraging our undergraduate and graduate students, many of whom are first-generation college students who come from low-income and immigrant backgrounds, to embrace who they are and to recognize that their voices matter. And it is this critical engagement of class identity in American society and resistance to the status quo that brings me to discuss Joe's novel, The Bystander's Scrapbook, from which he will be reading from tonight. Published in 2001, the novel is a sweeping political saga about class struggle. From the streets of Boston to the villages of Italy, Torra's novel spans decades, bridging the threat of anti-Americanism during World War I with the dismantling of long-term economic and social policies in a post-Cold War society. The novel's imaginative structure, literally a scrapbook of intersecting multiple narrative threads set off by different typeset fonts, details the activities of labor radicals from the early 1910s through the 1930s, including Sacco and Vanzetti. And these individuals have disappeared from historical memory. The story, set in 1984, is not linear. Instead, dispersed throughout the narrative is a collage of newspaper reports, journal entries, and newsletters, excerpts from a secret anarchist archive cultivated by Vin, an old Italian intellectual with an intense distrust for institutions. And he keeps these documents tucked away in file cabinets in his home. Greg, a former PhD history student who works a dead-end job as a dishwasher at a local restaurant, assists Vin with cataloging the many files, articles, and letters that he's collected over the years. As Vin reveals to Greg, recovering the past is crucial for understanding who we are to become. History, he says, was for shaping the future of the world. The unlikely pair forge a friendship in which Vin becomes a pseudo-father figure to Greg, who was abandoned by his own father when he was a teenager. Eventually, after separating from his girlfriend, Carol, Greg moves in with Vin. Their epic talks, spent over long mornings and late evenings, sipping espresso and grappa, span such topics as music, food, education, and the environment, and consumerism, what Vin calls the curse of modernization. One exchange between the two men confronts the Sacco and Vanzetti case directly, as well as the failure of mainstream America understanding the need to protect workers' rights. As Vin prophetically states, and I put the quote here so you might be able to follow it, The labor struggles aren't taught as a significant part of American history. Christ, even the students paying attention come out of an American history course viewing labor history the same way they view slavery. Like it happened in the past, it has since been cured. Same with Sacco and Vanzetti. They teach the case as an ugly wrong committed in the distant past that could never happen again. The idea that the union might be necessary for workers to have some kind of voice in their workplace no longer exists. And before long, the workforce will be working more hours for less money. I think we know whose voice this is. It's very familiar to us. The majority of the plot moves back and forth in time, highlighting the conflicts historical revolutionary figures faced then with Greg's present day struggles. For example, there's the trip that Vin and Greg take to Barre, Vermont to visit the local historical society and learn about the history of granite workers and anarchists who organized there. Long sections of the novel are devoted to describing the events leading up to the Lawrence strike and the Ludlow massacre. There's mention of Enrico Malatesta, Tina Donato, and Carlo Valdinocci, Italian anarchists who laid the groundwork to radicalize worker resistance in this country. And finally, there's Greg's emerging transformation from his alienation as a bystander in his life in America to actively choosing his own future after returning from a visit to see family in Italy. Torra's focus on the global aspects of worker solidarity, of mapping out the migration, immigration, and deportation of Italian radicals between Italy and the United States expands an understanding of capitalism's effects on the poor and the working class. Across the decades, Italian-American authors such as Arturo Giovannitti, Pietro Di Donato, Vincent Ferrini, and Diane de Prima have politically and poetically addressed revolutionary ideas in their writing. We can now add Joseph Torra's name to the ever-growing list of artists who continue to make visible the varied and complex experiences of Italian-American labor radicalism in their work, and in doing so, keep the memory of Sacco and Vanzetti alive. Please join me in welcoming Joseph Torra.
How's this?
Great. When I knew Vin and when I knew Bob in the 1980s, I would have been high, but I'm not now. Thank you. Thanks, Michele, if you can hear me. I love you very much. Thank you, Dean. Yeah, I don't think I need it, but...
Yes, for the broadcast, you need it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Michele. And this was my first time here tonight since Bob DiTillio died. And Bob was a very dear friend of mine. He was, just like Vin. First, I want to say, when you're a young writer and you're trying to find material, and you have a character handed to you on a silver platter, you grab it. And that's what Bob DiTillio was to me. And he knew I was writing a book about him because I couldn't not write a book about him. I was a young writer, grew up on the streets of Medford, kind of a troublemaker kid, and son of an Italian immigrant. And I met Bob at a very important point in my life. And it was the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was president. I was certainly disgruntled, but it was Bob who radicalized me. It was Bob who put me in touch with my Italian heritage, with these great historical people that had come before me. He put me in touch with the labor movement, not just the Italian-American immigrants, but the labor movement, unions, anarchism, and just changed my life. He was a mentor, he was a friend. I loved him dearly. And when I first met him, and I actually lived at the house where all this material upstairs came from for a while. So I lived with that stuff. I knew what was there. And when I walked in here today and saw it first time since Bob passed, it was very emotional for me. So I'm having a bit of a hard time because I used to see all that stuff all the time. And Bob and I spent so much time together, drinking espresso, drinking grappa, talking, listening to music. He loved opera, he loved jazz, and we would listen to jazz and talk and drink espresso and grappa all day. And when I lived there, just wake up in the morning and there's a pile of Chronica Cervisas, and microfilm machines, and that was it, And I remember saying to Bob, and those of you who knew him knew he was stubborn and kind of didn't want to give in to anything. I remember saying, "What you got to?" As he got older, I knew, and I loved him, and I said, "Bob, you got to do something with this stuff. What are you going to do? You can't just leave this. It's your whole life's work." And he amassed this whole work, and so to see what Dean and Jerry and others have done, bringing that here, to walk in that room upstairs tonight, was very emotional. And I remember it all. I saw it. I saw this man building a life's worth of work and love. So it's really great. And it was his dream for it to go to the BPL. Even though he was such an ornery guy, he certainly almost sabotaged that from happening, and it didn't. And the work of Jerry and Dean and others, wow, it's good to have a little hope, especially in this day and age. So I'm going to read a little bit from the Bystander Scrapbook. As Michele said, it is a collage, and it's got all sorts of different things going on, but there is a narrative trajectory in the book, which focuses on Greg, or Gregorio, who is a dropout from graduate school, a history major, and Vin, this man he meets who becomes a father figure and a mentor, who's an anarchist and who opens his world up to him. I'm going to read from just a couple of little sections, and one is just kind of a snippet of typical things that Bob and I did. And, sometimes fiction, you don't have to go that far for it. I mean, you certainly have to hopefully impose your imagination on your reality, but sometimes life is good enough for fiction as far as I'm concerned. This is based on a semi-true story. I'm also a poet and an editor, and at the time I was tracking down a Boston poet who was kind of an outlaw, an underground figure, who not a lot of information was known about. And Bob said, I'll help you. We'll find out what we need to know about this guy. So I use this later in the book. And then I will also read just a piece, which is the closing section of the book, in which Gregorio has just returned from Italy. He went to Italy to trace his roots. He spends quite a bit of time over there, several months, I don't remember, but he's gone for quite a while. He had a falling out with Vin, because Vin, who was much older, and took up with Gregorio's girlfriend, because Vin was a free love guy. And Gregorio, at the time, was heartbroken that Vin would do that to him. So without even telling Vin, he just took off and went to Italy and lived with his relatives over there for a while. At this point in the story, I'll read the second section. Gregorio flies back to the States. He goes to Vin's apartment because he realizes, I just have to make up with Vin. And he, anyway. So I'll read a little bit, and this was, since this is about Bob and about the character, you know, again, Bob was so easy to just get into a book because of the things he would say, the way he would act. And anyway, I'll pick up my also, yeah, so Veronica, who's the woman who was Gregorio's girlfriend, who Vin took up with, she will pop up when Gregorio returns to Vin's. Vin was generous with his time and money. Though I don't know where the latter came from, he always had some cash in his wallet and insisted on buying the drinks or coffee. Any time of the day or night, his phone could ring with a call from a friend, frequently with a computer problem. And if Vin couldn't walk them through the problem over the phone, he'd be right over. He did months of work helping the local Italian community make a desktop book of photos, stories, and memoirs from residents. There was a Japanese woman, a musician, who spoke little English and was having trouble with her green card status. I assumed they were intimately involved, though Vin denied it. Standing in line with her at bureaucratic offices became his regular practice for a time. She was a widow, evicted from her regular apartment, her apartment. I'm sorry, I don't see very well. And Vin said that she had nobody to help. And there was an Italian immigrant who never learned to speak English and wrote a book about his childhood memories from Cassino during World War II. He saved a little money and was going to see the book into publication on a vanity press, but needed an English translator. Vin worked for 6 months translating the book and never took a penny. In 1989, a friend of Vin's approached him. She was seeking information about her brother, who died in 1975. The brother was older and left home when she was 5 years old. Being Italian immigrants of the old school, her parents disowned the brother because of his lifestyle, which they viewed as unsavory. Vin was no private eye, he told her, but he'd see what he could do. The brother used aliases during his lifetime. Vin took all the information he could from the sister, and over the next several weeks, he and I began tracking down leads, which led us to assorted state and federal institutions. At Boston City Hall, we located the man's death certificate. The name on the certificate was an alias, and the man's parents and place of birth listed as unknown. The cause of his death written as ingestion of large amounts of Doridan. Quaaludes, you might remember those. I learned to keep my mouth shut when I accompanied Vin to inquire about the brother's records. My approach was to walk up to a clerk and disclose every last bit of information, only to find a clerk unaccommodating. After our first encounter, Vin told me that if I was to come along on these excursions, I must keep my mouth shut, since my all-informative style wasn't going to get us anywhere. Years of dealing with the authorities over federal and state records taught Vin to reveal as little as possible when conferring with them. He offered a crumb of information at a time. Eventually, he could wear down any clerk and have enough in his pocket to overcome any last objection or negation. At a federal records office, we viewed records of the man's court trials and later spoke with people who'd known him. In the end, it was enough to help with the woman piece together her brother's adult life. He was a poet, and some people we interviewed had signed copies of his little books, letters, notebooks, and journals, which the sister was welcome to view. He was a homosexual, addicted to street drugs, served time in prison and institutions for mental health problems. He was also admired by poets and friends and those in the street community of petty thieves, prostitutes, and runaways. We acquired copies of the brothers' books and several photographs for which his sister was grateful. One day during our investigation, Vin and I were walking down Tremont Street, discussing the numerous lives that go unnoticed, but are kept alive in little books, letters, or photographs, held sacred by friends and family. Suddenly, shoes glistening, slick trench coat open over designer suit, Newbury Street haircut, expensive briefcase in hand, a man about my age power walked by us with his arm extended as he checked the time on his wristwatch. It was a glorious afternoon, warm for late March, and the sun fashioned mirrors on the Hancock Tower. I didn't think Vince saw the man until, without missing a beat, he said, "Now there's a man making his way purposefully through life." Anybody who knows Bob could just hear him saying that. On the outskirts of the North End, we decided to get a pizza at the Old Regina. We walked down Hanover Street, then cut down a small side street to Salem. Vin wanted to get a loaf of bread. New restaurants were springing up everywhere. Grocers, butchers, smoke shops, and druggists replaced by upscale eateries with high-priced menus hanging in the window. At the spot where DiPietro's bread used to stand, we were face to face with another restaurant. "I can't believe it," Vince said, shielding his eyes from the sun to look inside the window at the fine linen tablecloths, shiny silverware, and sparkling round wine goblets on the tables. Vin scratched his head, and a blizzard of dandruff. I gave Bob a nice head of hair with dandruff, and those of you who know him, he was bald. I'm sorry. Vin scratched his head, and a blizzard of dandruff blew up around him. He looked up Salem Street, then down Salem Street. Restaurants as far as the eye could see. "It's gone completely downhill since the mob left." You can hear Bob in the North End saying, "Ever since the mob left, the North End's gone downhill." And this will be a closing section when Gregorio returns home after being away for quite a while in Italy. It was after midnight when the taxi pulled up in front of Vin's. The rooms were dark, but Vin's car was in the driveway. I paid the driver, grabbed my bag out of the trunk, and climbed the stairs. I gave the door a hard knock. There was no answer, so I knocked again, then rang the bell. Several more knocks and bell rings went unanswered, so I picked up my bag and started down the stairs. Just then, I noticed movement in the front window. The front door opened and a woman's voice called out my name. It was Veronica. She ran down the stairs in a nightshirt and underpants and threw her arms around me. Greg, tears running down her face. "Where have you been?" "What do you mean, where have I been? I've been in Italy. Where's Vin?" "Oh, Christ." She took my arm, led me up the stairs into the apartment. In the kitchen, she put on a pot of espresso, holding back sobs. I looked around the apartment It was a mess. Books, records, papers strewn haphazardly over the floor. Do you want a drink? Yeah, but where the fuck is Vin? He's dead. Vin's dead. I tried to speak, but couldn't. I swallowed. Dead? She placed a pot of espresso and 2 cups on the dining room table, walked over to me, and we embraced, and her tears began again. I loved him, you know. I really loved him. Everything happened so fast. Didn't you hear about the computer ring? I don't know what you're talking about. I've been in Italy. Veronica sat down at the table, wiped her tears on her shirt sleeve, then began to speak again. Shortly after I left for Italy, Vin began to suffer from various physical symptoms, which in his usual fashion he ignored. He lost weight, and his appetite and his extraordinary energy level diminished. His skin color got bad, and he was suffering from assorted pains. Veronica urged him to see a doctor, but he refused, claiming he was the victim of a bug and it would pass. As usual, he indulged in the medicine that he used whenever he suffered a common cold or a major flu, grappa. One morning, he collapsed on the living room floor. Veronica phoned for an ambulance. They rushed Vin to the hospital. Against his wishes, they held him there for tests. Within several days, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. They gave him 6 months, give or take. Vin took it well, a lot better than Veronica. During that time, she did everything she could to make him comfortable, though he insisted on working when he felt up to it. Suddenly, one morning, federal agents appeared at the door and arrested Vin in connection with the ring which was distributing illegal computer programs. The programs were used to sabotage computer systems. At one point, the virus made its way into the Pentagon's main computer system, and only a turn of fate and some quick action on the part of the Pentagon's computer aces destroyed it. The virus was said to work by stealing information while it simultaneously deleted it from the target system. The story was in the national headlines for several days, she said. The ring originated somewhere overseas, and the central connection on the American continent was in Mexico. Veronica said she had no idea what Vin was up to, but when she visited him in jail, he didn't deny it. Vin was quite knowledgeable about computers, but he was no hacker. Though at the time, I didn't doubt for an instant he might somehow be connected with such an operation. It made sense. Vin's bail was set too high. Veronica needed to raise money. She was in the process of securing the official medical records to prove Vin's illness, which might allow him to be released, when she got a call from someone who told her Vin had died in his sleep. She went to the morgue with Vin's brother. Vin had left wishes to have his body cremated. There was no money, so his brother provided the fee. She pointed to the liquor cabinet and said, "He's in that blue jar." In the meantime, agents visited Vin's apartment several times, turned it inside out. They took every computer disk, all of Vin's microfilm archive, the projector, all of his files, papers, notebooks, regardless of whether they reflected on the case. They pulled down all the books from the shelves, opened each one up, emptied record covers of their contents on the floor, and left everything where it fell. On 2 occasions, Veronica was brought in for questioning. My name came up in each interrogation, and the feds flashed a driver's license photo of me wanting to know my whereabouts. If I wasn't connected, Veronica said, it would be best if I contact the agents and figure out how to clear myself, now that I was back in the country. If I was involved, I better get myself a good lawyer, she said. During the time Vin was ill, he spoke of me often, she told me, and desperately hoped that I would return before he died. He was sorry things turned out the way they did. Knowing I would eventually return, he said to leave his archive and library to me. He told Veronica I'd know what to do with everything. But except for the trashed books, albums, and tapes, all the archival work was confiscated. Every last bit of film, all of the files and discs, a lifetime of Vin's work, gone. Thank you very much. Thanks. And thanks for coming tonight, and Jerry and Dean, just amazing work. Bob would be proud. You did him right.
Well, this is the moment where we open the house for greetings or comments. This could be both people here with us or out online. We are proudly. Yes, this is yours. Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Joe. That was just beautiful, and I look forward to discovering your work more intimately, especially after that beautiful introduction from Michele as well. Thank you, Michele. Is there anyone else who, I had so many really interesting conversations between 5 and 7 during which we had Jerry give us or not me, I was down preparing dinner and whatnot, but a tour of the archives upstairs and talked about what was there. And we'd like to see if there's anyone else who wants to say hello. There's about 25 people online. Amar? On Zoom. Are you muted? Is that Leonard? Oh, hello, Leonard.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was hoping, I'm hearing an echo, but I'll try to speak slowly.
We hear no echo.
I'm hearing it after I speak. I don't hear an echo from your speaking, but everything I say is being echoed back to me. All right. I'm very eager to be part of this event. You know, of course, that Sacco and Vanzetti have been a concern of mine since 1977, the exoneration by Dukakis and my interest in Mark Wittstein's work that dates back to 1968. But in 77, I started working on completing his opera Sacco and Vanzetti, which was premiered in Connecticut in 2001, and then finally had its orchestral stage premiere in the Bronx in 22 and was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. David Rothauser has been a terrific advocate for it, but there's some points that need to be clarified about Sacco and Vanzetti, because we have a lot of literature out there. The opera by Anton Coppola, for example, and some writings of Carlo Tresca and Marian Trashadi, and the film by Peter Miller, which tend to perpetuate the myth of Francis Russell's 1963 American Heritage article that Sacco might have possibly have been guilty. This is nonsense. And it was proved by Herbert Ehrman and Sarah Ehrman to Mark Wittstein and to Michael Dukakis. I met Michael Dukakis in person finally at their last trip to Boston in 22, and he told me that it was Sarah Ehrman and her husband Herbert that convinced him that Sacco and Vanzetti were innocent, and that's why he exonerated them. He did not pardon them. That would have meant they were guilty. He exonerated them. I miss Michael Dukakis. He just retired as a teacher, and I missed him at the convention. He should have been there, the Democratic convention, and he should be here tonight. I think he was on the list of invitees, but he's 90 years old now. You know, when he's able to do whatever he's able to do, we're always very grateful, I'm sure. But I think it's very important that those who care about Sacco and Vanzetti and the committee and the community of Boston be aware of the misinformation that is out there, and that we should continue to insist that, as they said to their death, they were innocent. I would love to hear David Rothauser respond to this. I think he agrees with me on it. I'm sure Bartolomeo would also, although he was pursuing, at the end of his life, he was pursuing concrete evidence that the Morelli gang had committed crime for which Sacco and Vanzetti were wrongly convicted and executed. And he hadn't found what he considered to be absolutely definitive proof yet, but he was working on it. And there's a wonderful film by Reginald Rose that was shown on NBC TV. I have a copy of it, but it's prohibitively expensive to show it. They want like $75 a frame or something to show it. But in that film, Reginald Rose shows airmen interviewing witnesses and showing them photographs of Joe Morelli. And the witnesses look at the photo of Joe Morelli and say, "That's Sacco," which shows that the whole case was based on misidentification. And it was the Morelli gang that committed the crime that Celestino Medeiros confessed to, but wouldn't name names, so they executed him with Sacco and Vanzetti. It's an American tragedy, and we have to recognize the depth of the injustice and the total innocence of the defendants in this case. I want to say that my book. This week I celebrated my 75th birthday at a concert, and we were hoping that my book was going to be coming out in time. It's called Continuator, the autobiography of a socially conscious cosmopolitan composer. There's a lot about Sacco and Vanzetti in it, and Blitzstein, also about the Rosenbergs, because when Mark Blitzstein was writing his opera Sacco and Vanzetti that I completed, he was thinking of the Rosenbergs. That's what his sister told me. And Michael Dukakis himself has been encouraging the Meeropol family to pursue exoneration the way he gave it to Sacco and Vanzetti in '77. They've gotten the City Council of New York to issue an exoneration statement about Ethel Rosenberg. They haven't managed to achieve that with Julius, because it has been established that Julius was in fact a spy, but he was not an atomic spy. And the Rosenbergs were convicted of atomic or conspiracy to commit atomic espionage, of which they were innocent. There's a very important book called The Final Verdict by Walter Schneer, edited by his wife Miriam Schneer, which I helped Robbie Meeropol and the Rosenberg Committee to get published. That's the definitive word. The Final Verdict is the book that everybody must read who is concerned with the Rosenberg case. And the Sacco and Vanzetti case and the Rosenberg case are linked indissolubly. In my completion of Blitzstein's opera, when Sacco and Vanzetti's last words are "We are innocent," they are quoting from the cantata that I wrote based on the letters of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, called "We Are Innocent," a few years earlier. So this is what I wanted to offer you and to say to you. We have 3 more years to the centennial, and there's a lot of effort. To close the window because we're getting lane traffic noise. Okay. The centennial is when we should really have an enormous commemoration in 3 years. And I'm hoping that the opera will be produced in Philadelphia or in Boston, where it deserves to be. There's a new opera director in Philadelphia, which was Mark Lichtenstein's hometown, and he has agreed to look at the score, to consider programming it. I'm very hopeful that he may do so. I'm also trying to get Gil Rose of the what is it called, BMOP, the Boston Modern Orchestra Project, to give serious consideration to Sacco and Vanzetti in Boston. That's where it belongs. That's where it should be done. And I urge anybody in Boston that has any kind of connection with the music scene there, with Gil Rose, with BMOP, to encourage him to consider doing it. So those are the things that are in progress right now. One other thing I want to mention is Matteo Marullo, who was the mayor of Torre Maggiore and is now the head of the Sacco Vanzetti Museum in Torre Maggiore. Was in touch. He was on the Zoom when we did the official launch of the video of the Sacco Vanzetti opera, and he asked for a copy of the video with subtitles in Italian, which I need some help with. Unfortunately, Bob DiCilio would have been the person to do it, but I'm hoping that we can find someone that can work on that with me. And he's been in touch with me recently on some sort of gain rep app or something. I'm not sure what it is. Michele, I know you were in touch with the people in Torre Maggiore. Are you in touch with Matteo Marullo at all? Or is anybody else there in touch with him? I know Bob was in touch. He's the person that put us in touch with Fernanda and the city people in Torre Maggiore. Is there anyone there, Michele, or anyone else that has that kind of contact that would like to say something about it? And again, David Rothauser, I would love to hear your reaction to what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Yeah. Oh, hi.
Oh, she's gonna stand up.
This is truly an honor to be here. My name is Paula Panzarella.
And I'm Frank Panzarella.
We're from New Haven, Connecticut. In 2002, I created a performance piece to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the execution of Sacco and Vanzetti. There were a number of cultural organizations and Yale University, Southern Connecticut State University, New Haven Arts Council, New Haven Library, Schubert Theater, all put on a number of different shows and panels. Neil Proto created an opera that was shown at Schubert Theater. There's a lot of information. What I did was another collage. I combined quotes from the trial, from newspaper clippings, from texts and poetry and song. And we're going to read 4 short excerpts of Outcry for Justice.
I want to say one thing that I thought was really interesting in the way Paula put this program together was, in every town that we did this performance, we found local history and local actual testimony from people who were part of Sacco and Vanzetti committees. And we incorporated that into each local performance so that people got to hear their local history as well as the history of Sacco and Vanzetti.
And one of the people was Carlos Salcedo and his father, Carl Salcedo. Carl was the grandson of Andrea Salcedo, the anarchist who was defenestered by the FBI. And we also met Cheshire Frazier in New York, whose father was on the Sacco Vanzetti Defense Committee. And in my performance that was in New York, I incorporate some of the quotes from Cheshire when I met her. And Carlos Salcedo is teaches film at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. So you just scratch the surface a little bit, and you find the Sacco and Vanzetti history. We were tried during a time that has now passed into history, when there was resentment and hate against people of our principles, the foreigner and the slacker. Both you and Mr. Katzman did all that was in your power to agitate still more the passions of the jury. We believed that this war was wrong. We believed it still more now after 10 years. I am glad to be on the doomed scaffold if I can say to mankind, it was a lie, it was an illusion, it was a cheat, it was a fraud, it was a crime. They promised you liberty. Where is liberty? They promised you prosperity. Where is prosperity?
This is what I say. I would not wish to a dog or to a snake, to the most low and misfortunate creature of the earth. I would not wish to any of them what I have had to suffer for things that I am not guilty of. I am suffering because I am a radical, and indeed I am a radical. I have suffered because I was an Italian, and indeed I am an Italian. But I am so convinced to be right that you could execute me 2 times, and if I could be reborn 2 other times, I would live again to do what I have done already.
American Appeal, April 16th, 1927. 12 liberal professors ousted for radicalism, criticized government policy in Nicaragua, and aroused ire of American Legion. 12 professors of the Westchester, Pennsylvania State Normal School have been discharged for alleged radicalism. The professors declare they will fight the action and make it a national academic freedom issue. One of the ousted professors, John A. Kinnaman of the Social Sciences Department, was discharged for writing a letter to the local news in which he maintained the right of a citizen to criticize government policies.
Today, in our enlightened age, it is not Italians who are targeted, but Arabs. Mass roundups, secret hearings, threats of mass deportations, with the added element of military tribunals, free of the taint of civil judges or juries, and secret extrajudicial executions illustrate tellingly what a difference a century makes. Sacco and Vanzetti have a great deal to teach us, not about yesterday, but about today. We fail to learn at our peril. On a move, long live John Africa, Mumia Abu Jamal, February 13th, 2002.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Frank. It was lovely. How about we close out with a song, unless there's somebody else out on the airwaves that want to chime in? I'm going to bring this up here and invite you to get your name on our mailing list and let us know. We'll let you know about upcoming events. We start up in October. We go every Sunday. We have a bunch of other online programs that we feature every 10th of the month from the John F. Kennedy Speech Society that plays his 1963 speech that probably got him assassinated. And they play the speech, and then we have a speaker, and we've had some remarkable ones. Dr. Helen Caldecott, introduced by Martin Sheen. We had Ray McGovern. We've had a bunch of others. Upcoming is Jill Stein in October, on the 10th of October, and it goes on from there. So be in touch with us, and we'll let you know about our programming and our activities and our concerts and our poetry readings and theater presentations on the Sunday before the election. Let me just point this one out. We have a reading of the Sinclair Lewis play that's called "It Can't Happen Here." We read it once this summer, and we realized how perfect it would be to have that on the Sunday before the election. Another remarkable speaker upcoming is Richard Wolff. We told Richard, Richard, will you be our Chomsky and Zinn for the 2020s? And what we're referring to is that Chomsky and Zinn used to speak at Community Church every year back in the 80s. Recurring, inspiring voices. Here's one that I wish they would have played at the DNC. It's an anthem for the ages, I believe, and anthem for Community Church. I don't think they'll be playing it at the DNC anytime soon, though, or at a baseball game. I'm going to start over. Atlantic and Pacific flow, the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. The land between sustains us all. To cherish her is our fervent call. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We reach these shores from distant lands. We came with hungry hearts and hands. Some came by force and some by will, to the auction block and the darkened mill. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We died in your fields and factories, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. An old coat hanger in a room somewhere, a trail of tears, an electric chair. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. Ooh, 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 and our great responsibility to be guardians of our liberty, till tyrants bend to the people's dreams, and justice flows like a mighty stream. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We lift our voices from the fire. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for joining us from wherever you were online. And we hope to see you in the fall when our programs and our concerts and our events start in full blast. Until then, do good work. Cause the revolution. Be well. Be safe. Be healthy.